right, great. Well, thanks everybody, and thanks you so much again, Mike, for coming.
Sure.
So this is a conference about technological change. We've gone through a lot of industries already. Telecom, internet, media are industries where people know there's been a high rate of technological change. It's affected everybody's lives here. And I just wondered if you, since you've been in the industry for a couple of decades, looking back, what you think really drove the changes over the last 20, 25 years? What was maybe different that didn't happen the way you thought it would, and what happened the way people did think it would?
Well, that's a big question.
Yeah.
I'll try to come up with a few short responses. I've been in the business almost 30 years, and in that period of time, the cable industry, I'll speak to that first, has been counted out a dozen times. It's a very popular topic among journalists to talk about the death of cable, and it's over. But what we've done in that period of time is reinvent ourselves. And seriously reinvent ourselves. 25 years ago, 100% of my revenue came from video. Today, less than a third of our $20 billion of revenue comes from video. We've got 40%, 45% from broadband and voice services. A quarter of it comes from mobile and from B2B. So what we've done in this industry is continue to innovate and evolve and grow and change along with consumers and the broader space we operate in. The key to our success has been the networks that are the foundation of our connectivity proposition, but also building scale. If you look at the companies that RA just had on that board, what do they all have in common? Global scale. Right. So we're competing with companies today that didn't exist not too long ago, that were able to go from 0 to 100 miles an hour through global scale and global customer bases. And they're forcing us to reinvent ourselves and to do so rapidly and I think very effectively. The benefit is we have very large customer bases that need the products and services we offer. The things that didn't happen, we didn't go out of business. Netflix didn't eat our lunch. In fact, Netflix is a great partner of mine. If I was up on stage here 5 years ago, you would have been asking me just exactly, which quarter in the next 3 years does Netflix eat your lunch? And I would say, well, I'm not so sure. What they taught us was that we had a technology gap, that consumers want to watch video on these devices, on their PCs, on their iPads, and all we had to do, really, to bridge that gap was to get our content, which is all the content people love, onto those devices and into the hands of consumers in a much more elegant, cool, user-friendly way. And then secondly, we put them on the box. So Netflix is on every one of our devices. Right. If you're a customer of ours in the UK and you search for a program, it'll show you in the guide, whether it's there on BBC, ITV, or Netflix. Where do you want to watch it? Right. So I think it's about understanding where your core business resides and then being flexible and innovative. That's I think I'm addressing, but where else do you want to go?
Well, let's talk specifically about cable. So, as you said, in the 1990s, a lot of people thought, well, cable, they're kind of old. They were the big business in the 1970s. Things are moving to the internet, and of course, cable has broadband. But and now we look at it 10, 15 years later. Cable has sort of ascended, and I think most people agree, gone past many of the telecoms still have a big stake in wireless, but particularly in the United States, people see cable as the owner of the most important pipe. So why did people get things so wrong? What was the story, and what accounts for cable's assumption of this predominant role in internet access?
Well, again, a lot of questions here. I mean, look at the internet piece is simple. Right. It's a better pipe. So our average customer in Europe today, just to give you some stats, average customer is getting 100 megabits per second, average, but we're selling 500. So our ability to get to a gig, we're just around the corner. We have 50 million homes today in Europe that are what we call gig-ready, so we'll get to a gig very quickly. Comcast is the same. It's a superior technology to copper, and nobody's building fiber. They're not building fiber because it's not economic to build fiber. So, and we're 90% fiber anyway. Our networks are fiber networks with coax just to the very last bit. So part of it is just the fact that it's a superior network, superior product. I'd say something else, and this is a broad conference, lots of topics here, but our industry was built by individuals that were owners and operators, entrepreneurs. And there's something to be said for the patience and the risk, the willingness to take risks that someone like John Malone, who I work for, exhibits versus someone who's a hired gun at an incumbent Arbach.
Right.
Who's got to just make the quarterly numbers and try to...
Arbach is a phone company. And
regional bell operating company. So my point is that this industry was built by entrepreneurs who each of whom, and I include myself as one of them, has been lower than, whale shit at one point in time in their life. Sorry. And so they have scar tissue, and they understand what it's like to succeed and to fail, and they are hugely determined. And our industry, our business was built by people like that. Our company today exists because of that fortitude and that willingness to see things, and to make the changes that we need to make. But I'll add this, to make them at the appropriate time. A lot of conversation here today. I didn't hear a lot of it, but I got feedback. Artificial intelligence, distributed networks, it's all really important stuff. The most important question isn't if these things will happen, it's when they will happen. Because if you invest ahead of that curve, you end up running into the wall. So there's a lot of, I think, smart capital management that doesn't get headlines. But it's one of the reasons. If you've got the innovation, the technology, but you also manage your business in a clever way, I think you're in good shape.
Well, you say if then when. Are there things that everyone said was going to happen that actually didn't happen? One of the things I think about is even in the late 90s, people were saying, there's going to be 2 or 3, 4 pipes at the home. There's going to be broadband over power lines. There's going to be, robots that crawl through the sewers and deliver fiber optic to you. So it seems to me like there was a time that all these things were said. It wasn't if then when, but then the when we're still waiting on. So
yeah, I mean, you've just hit a few of them. I think it's too soon to say. A lot of the things that you're really asking me, what do we worry about?
Right.
What am I worried about today? Because we have a business that, as I said, is diversified in revenue streams, has as its foundation an incredibly powerful network, operates in favorable regulatory regimes. So what's going to go wrong? Right. And what could go wrong is regulatory regimes can change, right, as we all in this room would be watching and knowing and understanding, and that's a risk. But also, not seeing the the big ball rolling towards you. We didn't think Netflix was a big ball. We knew Netflix was really more partner than it was competitor or foe. But there are others. I mean, Amazon announced today that it has bought the rights to 10 NFL football games, that it's going to stream on Thursday nights, and they paid $50 million. It's not going to make any difference to my business. Right. They don't watch football in Europe. But at the same time, it does make a difference to those in this marketplace who have broadcast networks, cable channels, and distribution platforms. So there are big, tectonic shifts occurring really in the OTT space that we have to be thoughtful about. And then the other big trend, of course, is convergence. Right. You'll see today, we talked about convergence 25 years ago. There was a conference that Goldman Sachs puts on called Communicopia, and really the first one was, 20 years ago or something. And the whole premise of Communicopia was it's all going to come together somehow. Well, the fact of the matter is it has. Right. You look at convergence, there is convergence among distribution and content players. Look at Time Warner and AT&T, right? There is convergence among networks. We own mobile networks. If you told me 10 years ago I would own a mobile network, I'd have laughed you out of the room. But we own mobile networks. We're a mobile company today. So there's massive convergence among networks. There's convergence among OTT operators and traditional operators. We're partnering with Netflix. We're launching our own OTT services. There's global convergence among markets. So it is definitely coming together, and I think you're going to end up with a handful of large platforms, let's call them, right, that are going to be, survivors. Right, sure. And the rest of them won't be.
Well, let me get back to that in a second, because I want to talk about consolidation. But I do want to talk first about the regulatory environment. Now, unlike most cable companies, or many cable companies, you are in a huge number of countries. I don't know how many total countries
30.
are in. 30 countries. So you are dealing with, a complete patchwork of laws. Are there, are there enormous differences between the different countries regulatorily when it comes to your industry? How do you deal with that
Sure.
variation? And are some a lot worse, a lot better? Yeah.
So, our industry, if you ask John Malone, if he were on the stage, and you say, what are the things that have, when have you lost more hair, or when have you really gained weight, or when have you been most nervous? It's when the regulatory environments change, because it definitely is a big issue when you're kind of a regulated business.
Right.
I would say the European Union over the last 10, 12 years, let's say, has done a very good job of regulating this business. Why do I say that? And I would contrast that, you know, allowed to, because I don't operate here, with earlier speaker today and you know, what's happened over the prior 8 years. But let me tell you what the European Union did right. They had incumbent telcos that were monopolies forever. And they realized these guys were going to do nothing if they didn't unleash competition. So they gave us, small cable operator at the time, really carte blanche to go consolidate cable operations. So whereas Comcast today can only own 30% of the homes, in the UK, we are the only cable operator. In Holland, we are the only cable operator. There is no other cable operator there. Why is that a good thing? Because it's only when you have that scale that we can force KPN or BT to innovate, to build fiber. Never really happened here, right? The phone companies here, I think, have languished a little bit. They tried to build fiber, and AT&T did DSL, but it hasn't really come on, which is why Comcast has, you know, for every one customer that the cable operators lose in video, they gain 4 broadband subs. I'll take that trade. With 90% gross margins. So I think it's when you recognize that you need infrastructure-based competition to really create consumer benefits that it's worked well. And EU has done that. And they've also had a very healthy, I think, appreciation for net neutrality, your expertise, because they realized that Silicon Valley is way over there, that you have to it's hard to call a phone company dominant when they have a 50% market share of broadband, but then not recognize that Google, when it has 90% of search activity in a particular market, isn't dominant. There's like some, you know, something's not right there. And they were looking at, so they look at Silicon Valley, I think, in a healthy way. And they know that without an economic model that shows a return, there will be no infrastructure. I mean, we're investing $4 billion a year, building networks, building technology. We're not going to, that 4 is going to become 2 pretty quickly if we're not able to find a reasonable return on that investment. So I think they recognize that, and they've done a good job with it. As an example.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
You're not buying it.
Well, I have some disagreements on the net neutrality front, but I'll leave those for another time. Well, and I just wanted to ask about, do you find Latin America, you've got
much more chaotic. Yeah, every country in Latin America, and we're in Caribbean and Latin America, is a very different kettle of fish. So it's really more complicated than that. But they're dealing with all the same issues. You know, in the Caribbean where we operate, there's tons of illegal OTT. WhatsApp is completely disrupting the mobile business. So they're slowly dealing with it. You know, I was on stage with our current FCC commissioner in Barcelona, the Mobile World Congress, and he used a term that I really appreciated. He said that he practices regulatory humility. By that, he meant, obviously, that, you know, markets will normally sort themselves out. Let me give you an example. There was all kinds of concern around AT&T offering DirecTV Now on the phone for free if it's their phone. They call that zero rating, right? Because, oh my gosh, you're giving preference to DirecTV, it's your product, that's going to stifle innovation, it isn't fair, AT&T customers shouldn't be given those benefits, nobody else is going to invent content ever in the world, you know, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, what happened here? All of a sudden, every mobile operator offers you an unlimited package. So that one little innovation of zero rating on the mobile platform, you can't turn the TV on without an unlimited offer from Verizon, T-Mobile. So that was a good example in my mind of practicing regulatory humility. Zero rating, it's really not that bad a thing. But oh, by the way, look what it's stimulated in consumer benefits by allowing it to evolve, and other competitors will then take advantage and see the opportunity. It's all good. Consumers are winning all the time, in my opinion.
Well, the plans used to be unlimited. They went to limited. They went back to unlimited. So there was a bit of a back.
What brought them back to unlimited, though?
That's true. It was
zero rating.
I'll give some credit to that. Let's go back to the vision of the future in this industry. This is not the only industry that's undergone a lot of consolidation, but it's
of course not. Yeah.
Certainly one that is. And you know, for people who aren't in this industry, the most recent trend, I can push to the United States by AT&T, is the idea of the cable and the wireless companies buying content. The biggest example of this is AT&T planning to acquire Time Warner and all of its holdings. What do you think is suddenly driving this you know, there was a long time that vertical integration began to get a bad name in this industry. I only have to say the words AOL, Time Warner, for people to think like, oh, those didn't always quite work out the way people thought they would.
Yeah.
And you know, and for a long time, people wanted to be, you know, kind of pure and do what they do best.
Yeah.
We were talking with another cable guy, Rocco Camiso. He's like, what do I know about content? I'm a cable guy.
Yeah.
You know, and so, but now the trend has been towards, suddenly a new trend back towards vertical integration. I don't know if I don't think you've done that yet.
Well, there is no Time Warner in Europe, but
Right.
we own sports rights, so we do vertically integrate in some instances.
Right.
But I'll tell you what's behind that. Over the next 5 years, I think, the amount of data consumption on mobile phones is expected to grow 7-fold. That's 50% a year.
Right.
More consumption over mobile networks on these devices. And 2/3 of that is video. So, video is data fat. I mean, you can't get video across a network without consuming massive amounts of network capacity, as you know.
Right.
So if you're AT&T and you're looking at your mobile business for a moment, and you realize that, you know, over time, the vast majority of what's going to be moving through my towers is video, maybe I need to hedge or diversify or own some of that. That's one thing. Secondly, I think it is this idea that you don't want to be left behind.
Right.
Because if Time Warner got bought by Google or Netflix or Apple, or, you know, now they don't, maybe they won't sell it to me. Thirdly, I think, you know, is this, I heard earlier this morning that...
Let me interrupt you there. What does it mean to be left behind exactly? I mean, if it's a bad idea, right?
Well,
if mergers are bad ideas, then you're smart being left behind.
Well, my point is this.
The punishment? Yeah.
There is a reasonable concern that if Apple were to start buying up Hollywood studios, they would make that content available on their platform and nobody else's, for example. So that's one concern. And then I heard earlier that Tom Wheeler said that, you know, it's really about railroads and boxcars and, you know, all that stuff. But the truth of the matter is it matters what's coming across the network, and people want to own some control over what's coming across the network. So I'm not sure that's such a bad thing. And the last thing is fear.
Right.
You know, fear that you won't remain relevant to your 100 million customers or whatever the number is.
Right.
But I think that transaction will get approved. I think it'll get approved with modest remedies, and I think it's not a bad thing.
Even though the president did go on the record several times, so the president says a lot of things, saying that he was on
well, you would have more
trail
information than I would have about it, but,
Right.
but
Well,
my instinct is it will get approved.
Right. The president had said he was going to block the merger, although he, as we know, have said many things at many times. But so that, I mean, you've offered more than one vision of the future. I want to almost force you to choose. One of them is a little bit where all the main cable platforms need to, cable platforms, content, internet sites need to sort of build themselves into highly integrated units. Otherwise, they face, in some ways, being excluded by others or not being able to get the content they need in order to have an attractive product. You know, this is the idea of being left behind if you don't buy. But right now, people aren't vertically integrated. Your average cable provider can get access to all the content, all the apps and stuff like that. So are you sort of suggesting we're going from a more open kind of environment where, more or less you get access to what you want, to one which is much more closed and there's very much starker, almost Hobbesian competition for
I don't think so. I don't think so. I don't think the drive, you're asking the question to maybe paraphrase.
Right.
Will, in 5 years, 10 years' time, will all the great content be owned by one or another island, essentially?
Right,
you have to get on that island to watch Game of Thrones.
Right.
You got to be on this island to watch the NFL. No.
Right.
That'll never happen. Content owners are too smart, number one. They maximize value by selling to everybody.
Right.
It's just zero marginal cost. So
Right.
they want maximum distribution. Number two, I think for us, when we get it, it's an arms race.
Right.
And generally in an arms race, nobody wins. So Time Warner and AT&T acquiring Time Warner, AT&T isn't saying Game of Thrones won't be available to anybody else.
Right. But then why buy it?
Well, because as I said,
yeah.
they know that 65% of that traffic is going to be video. They know that they want to be able to innovate. What does it provide them with?
Right.
It's not just what Time Warner does today, it's what they might do tomorrow, innovating in new forms of content. Why did Verizon buy AOL and Yahoo?
That's a good question.
They want to get smart. Why did Altice just buy an advanced advertising business? They're buying expertise. You heard today that it's all about data, using data, data intelligence. Well, That stuff is not in our DNA necessarily.
Sure.
Neither is content in AT&T's DNA. So I think it's also about diversifying, getting smart, building strength. But I don't think you're going to see these, bulkheads.
Right, or balkanized kind of.
I don't think you'll see that.
Future. Well, I mean, it does raise the question for you. You aren't in the United States, but do you then need, in this future we've talked about, even if it's somewhat cooperative, are you going to need to have your own content to be in this game? I mean,
in some cases we do. So in Holland, we launched our own sports channel, just an example. We did it because we had some rights and we are in a dogfight with the phone company there. But we do sell it. Over time, we'll sell it to others. Right now, it's exclusive. So there are small examples of that, but not wholesale examples.
Right.
In the UK, a market I mentioned earlier, BT Sport went and spent billions on English Premier League soccer. Why would BT, a phone company, buy those sports rights?
Right.
Well, if you're a broadband customer of BT's, they give it to you for free. Now, they'll sell it to us, and they sell it to Sky, which is a Fox company, but they're the ones who can sort of just give it away and subsidize it to their consumers. So it's not about just I have it and you don't, but I have it, and because I own it, I can afford to offer it to my consumers in a different way.
Right, I see. So it all comes down to sort of having it kind of for yourself, but still wanting to share it. So it's sort of a shared competitive environment.
I think regulators will make you share it anyway.
Yeah, depends on the regulator. Are we?
Time for Q&A.
Oh, okay.
You want to ask one more question?
Yeah, I did want to ask one more question, if you don't mind. Let's talk about just briefly about the future of television. I would say 10 or 15 years ago, the expectation of a lot of technologists was that eventually everything would move to kind of video on demand. You push the button, you get exactly the shows you want. But the latest trend in television is less of that, but more the idea of, especially in the United States, of giving people just smaller bundles. I'm thinking here of
skinny bundles,
skinny bundles, and so forth. So do you have a particular vision of the future of television? Do you,
a great question.
Betting on? Or,
great question, and I'll answer it quickly because I know everybody wants to get involved here. You may or may not know, the average American consumer today watches 5.5 hours of television. 5.5 hours. On average, they spend an hour on OTT like Netflix. So television is far from dead. The TV ad revenues every year continue to be flat, slightly up, slightly down. So what small changes in viewership are being overcompensated by increased costs in CPM? Because it's the only mass buy, it's an efficient buy, you can actually you can trust the data that the advertising agencies are selling you. So I think TV is far from dead. I mean, 84% of the time that people are watching television in a household with Netflix, they're still watching the screen, the big screen. Our strategy is to aggregate everything. So if you're a customer of ours in Europe, you aren't choosing between Netflix and Amazon and BBC. You're getting it all. You can watch anything and everything on our screen, on your iPhone, on your iPad, wherever you want to watch it. So we're an aggregator of content. Now, over time, people will clearly watch more television, time shifted, place shifted, and that's just convenience. So why wouldn't they? But I'm indifferent to that. Because if they're time shifting it and place shifting it, then they need my broadband connectivity to do that. So I think it's much ado about nothing, unless you're an advertiser.
Well, it's a little.
It's really in my mind.
Or you're ESPN and you're starting to lose.
But it's going to be a while. This is back to the not if, but when.
It's going
to take some time. A lot of inertia in that space.
Well, we've had a suggestion for audience questions, so why don't we open it up and see? Oh, do you have a question?
I have them here on the iPad coming in, actually.
Oh, okay, cool.
So first, Mike, who's your most feared competitor?
Well, we compete, because Europe is so fragmented and every market's different, we compete with different competitors in every country. So that's a very good question. I'd say, I keep talking about Holland. This was a phone company that really got it right. KPN. They built fiber, they invested in content, they innovated on the video platform. Probably these guys, I think it's a small, you wouldn't know them. They're a small Dutch cable telephone company, but they're quite effective. Globally, I don't call Netflix a competitor anymore. I call them a partner. I think Amazon is in everybody's rearview mirror. The announcement today that Amazon is putting NFL is exactly why we worried about partnering with them, because they want to be us. They want to disrupt us, and over time we'll see if they're successful. But they want to have a platform of channels, live and recorded and whatever you're going to do.
I'd say they want to do everything to be
correct, because
they don't only want to be you. They still want to sell me some books and
exactly. Yeah.
So there are a few good questions here. Another question is, the way you're describing vertical integration and cable operators owning content, has the world really changed in the last 20 years at all? Because back then, the cable operators did own content as well. And with all the technology changes, and are we still worrying about the same things?
What's changed dramatically is this, Aryeh. 10 years ago, 5 years ago, we were the only ones providing video in a particular marketplace. Today, everybody's selling video. There are hundreds of OTT apps. You can get video from 100 different people tomorrow, tonight, today. Phone companies offer video. Mobile operators offer video. Satellite operators offer video. So whereas 10, 20 years ago, the cable industry was trying to build content like CNN and MTV because it was different than free-to-air television, today, everybody's selling the same thing. So it's a much more vibrant, open market.
Okay, a regulatory question here that's maybe provocative for the two of you. What FCC regulations introduced by the Obama administration were most misguided, or to use the words of the new FCC chair, showed the least regulatory humility?
Well, I'm already on record on this one, but I did not think that the whole net neutrality provisions that went back to 1930s regulation made any sense. I think you're going to see that unwound. I think this latest, congressional move on privacy, to me, makes sense. Level playing fields, shouldn't pick winners and losers. And so I think it will all probably get unwound, and I wouldn't worry about it. I know we don't agree on this necessarily.
Right,
I just wouldn't worry about it. Because in the end, I don't make these decisions. Consumers, you guys make these decisions. You'll decide who wins and who loses in this business, especially today. My kids will decide. Won't be me. So I think we should just relax, and when it's going to unfold, I think.
I'll answer that. I think they were misguided in, this is not humility, but probably failed to block enough mergers. That's my view on it.
Okay.
Failed to block enough mergers. Probably should have blocked more mergers. I think that's a general view of the, that's not restricted to the FCC. That's the general, sort of a general comment on antitrust enforcement. They didn't end up, despite good efforts, there were mergers. They were blocked a few in telecom. There's certain mergers, other industries, too much consolidation. I think that was the greatest failing.
Which one in particular?
I would take back a lot of the airline mergers, just a good example. I mean, I know we're not talking about.
Good, we're staying away from TMT.
I've been trying to look, the result of all the airline mergers have been higher prices, worse customer service for consumers, and I don't think they're defensible. Some of the high-tech mergers, I don't know where you want me to start. Some of the advertising mergers that Google got away with, I don't think Facebook should have been allowed to buy its greatest social media competitor, Instagram. A couple of the areas where I think there's been mergers to something close to monopoly. Telecom, I actually have less in telecom. These probably aren't popular views here, but these are my views.
Okay. Last question I have is, Mike, there's yet to be a truly global communications company. You're obviously in Europe and Latin America, but companies like Facebook and the technology companies are, in fact, global, maybe except for China. So do you think there's a need to be in more markets, especially as you look at things like content and other services?
It's the difficult, it is, and I'll let you answer this too, Tim, but I think there's a reason why the Googles and the Amazons and Facebooks are global, because they're riding across standard standard open networks, which we have facilitated and other network operators have facilitated, which is great for consumers, all good. Difficult to be a global infrastructure player. Because first of all, it will cost trillions, not billions. Second of all, you need level playing fields and regulatory certainty. But also, it's when you're Verizon, will someday there be a global mobile player? Maybe. I'm not putting it out of question. But there is a need for more scale in our space. The reason we're successful from 20 years ago is we have regional scale. We're the largest in Europe. When we talk to Cisco, they listen. When we talk to Disney, they listen. So our industry needs more scale, and that might happen. You ever thought?
So I guess the bottom line is this people. It's interesting because in the late 20th century, people thought, scale was the 20th century story. That was the old, 1930s, 1950s. Scale is everything. But we've kind of come back to that. You look in the Silicon Valley, the winners are scale companies. It's not like 5 guys with a server. It's big, massive server farms, and I think telecom remains that way, but there was some idea that scale wasn't going to matter. Scale has come back. Scale is ruling the world, and I think that's where we agree on and end up.
All right, great. Tim Wu, Mike Fries, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Great.
Thank you, Mike.